Okay, we are in Pirkei Avot. We're in chapter 6, and we're in Mishnah 6 of chapter 6, and we're talking about the 48 virtues. I guess that's really it says Devarim, the 48 things through which a person can acquire Torah, in which Torah um, is acquired. And we went through a bunch of them. Um, So let's see. I can't remember exactly where we were. Um, I'm just gonna start randomly. Besimcha, with happiness. Uh, with happiness. As said before, happiness is the key to everything. King David says, even with Hashem besimcha, that you have to serve God with happiness, and everything we do goes better with happiness. I was once, I'm telling one of my stupid stories, excuse me. I was once at a Shabbat dinner with a bunch of artists. And the rabbi himself at this place in Chicago had been a filmmaker. And so he had a lot of artist friends. And all the artist friends were sitting around. They were super cool. I felt like I was like one of the cool kids. And these artists were sitting around and um, they were talking about art and stuff, and he what started talking about happiness. And so he started talking about happiness, and he asked them. He said, like, when do you make your best art? And all of them said that it was when they were happy. Now, I always assumed that the best art came out of pain, right? The best art, came out of like Van Gogh or something, came out of like some horrible heartbreak and pain and suffering, and that somehow or another suffering brought out artistic. But they said no. They said actually it was when they were happiest that they produced their best work. They said they may produce their most work, right, when they're miserable, but it's not their best work. So, so Kaylin, okay, don't forget to be happy while you're writing. Okay, remember to be happy. So happiness, um, Batara, purity. And as I said before, this could be ritual purity, or it could be kind of a spiritual purity. Shimush Chachamim, mentioned that before. I think I'm going backwards. Oh, I remember. This is where I ended off on Biyishuv. That was the last one I mentioned, was Biyishuv, which in mine is translated um, as serenity, right? As serenity. Um, Also very important, Kaylin, while you're right, make sure that you're serene while you're writing, but that having the ability to have Yishuv Adat, to have a calm and centered mind is essential to be able to acquire Torah. And by the way, it's interesting that he doesn't say learn Torah. He doesn't say learn Torah. He says acquire Torah. So that means to actually internalize it. When you acquire something, it becomes yours, right? It's no longer something which is outside of you, but now becomes something which is inside of you. It's something that you now own. You take ownership of it. So he's saying in order to take ownership of Torah, right? In order to take ownership of wisdom, you have to have these qualities as a prerequisite. So one of them is yishuf, is serenity. So now he says, um, uh, b'mikra, that one should have mikra. Mikra is the actual written text of the Torah, right? For Muslim friends, mikra is related to Quran, right? Kara, to call or to call or to recite. So you should have a mastery of the Mikra, of the written text of the Torah, the Mishnah, which uh, he translates here as Mishnah, which he may understand, which he may understand as um, as referring to the text of the Mishnah, probably that's not what it refers to. Mishnah also means repetition. So it means on the one, so learning the biblical text and going over the biblical text could also mean having a mastery of the oral law, as well. Could mean either one of those things. B'miyut schora, minimizing one's business, minimizing the amount of time that you spend in business. Okay, here's Larry. Okay, so I'm going.
Hi,
Hello, welcome,
thank you.
welcome, welcome. So minimizing business. Um, this, of course, can get you in trouble. There was a story about Reb Nosson of Breslov um, who got married, and he got married, and his father-in-law, was concerned that he wasn't working very hard. And so, of course, he pulled this out. He says, you wanted me as a son-in-law because I'm very learned in Torah, and it says here that you should limit your time in business. And his father-in-law wasn't necessarily very happy with that answer. Um, but there are many stories about rabbis and people who learned who would, they would open their store for a couple of hours every day, just enough to make their living, uh, and then they would close it off. Um, and then they would close it off. So miud schora, miud derech eretz, um, limiting or minimizing one's derech eretz in this case. Derech eretz has two meanings. One is kind of business with the world, right? Worldly business, or in general, having an occupation. The other meaning of derech eretz means literally the way of the world, right? Again, for the Arabic speakers, right? Derech is tarik, right? And eretz is ard, right? Earth, right? So the path of the earth. So derech eretz in this case means what you have to do, what your pursuit of an occupation, your career, uh, your business with the world. Derech eretz can also mean etiquette or ethical behavior. It's an interesting word in that case, and it creates some interesting concepts, that those two things are so closely connected. Um, but here, I think it means that if you're going to acquire wisdom, you can't be overly involved in your business, right? That you have to make time for it. You can't just be all about the work and not make time to do it. So you have to minimize it. Um, you have to be careful with some of these. Mi'ut tanug, reduce your pleasures. Reduce your pleasures. Um, minimizing, minimizing pleasure. Uh, Obviously, there are times, for example, on Shabbat, where we actually are commanded to experience pleasure. So there's nothing wrong with experiencing pleasure, right? Shabbat, you're supposed to experience oneg Shabbat. You're supposed to experience the pleasure of Shabbat. You're supposed to have good food. If you're married, it's recommended to have relations with your spouse, right? As ways of enjoyment, and there's nothing wrong with enjoyment. But again, it shouldn't become like the soul, right? An obsession or something that distracts you from being able to engage in higher things. And so, reducing your pleasure. Now, of course, people sometimes take this to extremes. They do various kinds of penances and various kinds of things to to deny themselves pleasure, and there may be some benefit in that. Um, there for sure is some benefit in that. But again, you want to seek moderation. So the assumption here is that most of us are pretty into pleasure, right? Most of us are pretty into it, and so therefore we have to reduce it. We have to reduce it some. Got to be careful with the next one. Mi'ut shena, minimizing sleep. Okay, don't do what I did. Okay, I minimized sleep for many years, and it's probably why I'm a big mess today. Don't minimize sleep in an unhealthy way, right? One shouldn't spend your whole life sleeping, right? You don't want to spend your whole life sleeping. You want to have a decent sleep schedule, but uh, you know, we don't want to discover, after 120 years that we've spent our entire life sleeping. So, minimizing sleep, but within the realm within the realm of healthy. The Rambam says, I think, was it 6 hours or 7 hours? I can't remember whether he says 6 or 7 hours of sleep. But everybody's body is a little bit different. So you have to, and as you in different ages, there's also differences in how much sleep you need, but not to be a sleepyhead. Mute sicha, limit your talk. And he says he translates it here as sicha as small talk, and I think that's reasonable. Sicha means chatting, talking. Now, again, you have to be kind of you have to really think about these things because there's some kind of talking, right? There's some kind of talking which is absolutely essential, right? Uh, when we're able to share very important things that are going on with us, with friends, and to be able to get, the insight that friends have or the insight that other people have or mentors, right? That's obviously very positive. And you certainly wouldn't want to stop that. The idea of we call it sichot chaverim, the conversation of friends. The assumption is that every person has something that you don't have. Every person has a perception of the world that you don't have, and so they always have something to be able to offer you in terms of perspective. So there's usually a benefit in talking. There's usually a benefit in talking to other people, but you know that there's some people where when you talk to them, you get a benefit, and other people where you talk to them, it's probably better not to. So to be careful about who you talk to and about what you talk to them about, and not to sort of chatter on for no reason, right? Because again, that kind of talk is not going to get you any closer to wisdom. It's just going to take you further away from it. So you have to make judgments. Again, when it says mi'ut to reduce, doesn't mean to get rid of it completely, but to apply, principles of moderation for small talk and in mute, sicha mute, schok, and limiting and minimizing laughter. Now, schok is probably not just laughter, right? It's not like that a person should be humorless, right? It's not that a person should be humorless. That would be very bad for you. Don't do it. Um, and I think I forget who was it? Was it the church at one point who said smiling was forbidden or something? I think there were Christian orders that forbid laughing or smiling. That's not really wise. But schok also means like mocking laughter. Like you don't want to be somebody who's always laughing. The we'll see in Path of the Just in Mesilas Yesharim, the book we're learning tomorrow. He talks about this, and he says that Laughter can become a greased shield against one's own reality, right? Sometimes people use hilarity, they use humor as a way of deflecting things which are real about themselves, right? So instead of letting in things that might be uncomfortable, right? They laugh them off, okay? Or they mock them, or they make them into a joke. So in ways like that, right? What goes beyond humor to kind of mocking can be something which could be something which really which unfortunately protects you from being able to see realities that you should be able to see, and to be able to think clearly, right? So you see some people, sometimes people you try, somebody you try to talk to them about something serious, and they're just making a joke out of everything, right? That's not going to work well. But again, humor, there's nothing wrong with humor. In fact, the rabbis say, I don't do this, but the rabbis say that before you teach Torah, you should always tell a joke, right? You should always tell a joke in order to relax your audience. I don't do that because I just don't tell jokes that well. My timing is not good, so I'll tell the joke and then I have to tell you it's a joke, which is doesn't work. So I don't tell jokes like that usually. Stories, yes. Jokes, no. So, uh, okay. Mizchok be'erach hapayim, having patience. Having patience. Erech apayim is actually an interesting word. We translate it as patience, but means literally having a long breath, right? When you get upset, you get nervous, right? Your heart starts to pound, right? Your heart rate goes up. You hit about 90 and you're a complete mess, right? And your breathing gets faster. Right? Breathing gets faster. So you should have Erech Apayim means to have breathe steady, right? Breathe steady. To be patient, to be able to be patient, even in difficult situations with difficult people. That's the hardest one in my experience. Um, but to be patient, and also to be able to be patient in the sense of like putting up with, right? Putting up with situations which are less than ideal. Now that doesn't mean having erech apayim doesn't mean, right? Having erech apayim, having patience, sabr doesn't mean that you are a doormat. There is no mitzvah to be a doormat, right? There's no commandment that you should be a doormat. But patience again within reason, right? And certainly not to be impatient, not to be somebody who is, ready to go off at a moment's notice, but to be able to to be able to put up with the kinds of things that human beings have to put up with. Next, um, belev tov, having a good heart, having a good heart. Um, so, so he translates it here as a kindly heart. I think that's a nice way. It's kind of an. What do you think having a good heart means? I'm not sure I know. What does it mean? You think having a good heart?
Havana, intention.
What?
Havana, intention.
Okay, having intention, having kind of focus in the things that you do. Okay.
I guess it was kind of what we were talking about yesterday about having your insides match your outsides so that you're kind of the integrity piece.
Oh, yeah. Love to that having your insides like your outsides, having sort of like living with integrity. That sounds right.
I would suggest that it might include your Yetzer Tov being predominant. That when faced with a surprise situation, your instinct is to do the kind thing or the right thing rather than. Um, I'll stop there.
Right. Makes sense that we all have, of course, we all have a kind of battle inside of us between our kind of our less than ideal instincts and our kind of higher self, and that your higher self tends to win the battle. That makes sense. That would be a kind heart. Okay. More thoughts on kind heart
Yeah, I think that like a kind heart to me would be like,
or a good
I
heart?
guess
Good heart.
a good heart, a good heart. I think it would be like empathy and like just like God-fearingness, awareness of God in all of our actions.
Yeah, it's a big one, right? It's a big
Yeah.
one. It's interesting that he includes this on a list with a lot of smaller things, and um, it but it's interesting because it does, right? It does seem like a big one, like really, um, like kind of all inclusive. And emunat chachamim, having having faith in the sages. Um, this is one about which I've had many discussions and arguments over the past. So having faith, so faith here, by the way, faith in the sense of like trusting in, right? Trusting in the wise people. So at least in the Jewish context, um, our understanding of what is right and wrong is mediated to a certain extent um, by the understanding of wise people. Now, what that means, does it mean the rabbis at the time of the Talmud? Does it mean the rabbis of today? Does it mean wise people in general, right? So, um, not necessarily a rabbi, but somebody who a chacham is somebody who has wisdom or who has knowledge in a particular area. So trusting in the expertise, right? Trusting in the expertise of those people who know. Now, some people understand this as meaning that you should have a rock a rock solid unquestioning faith in what rabbis say. Um, and of course, this, like all good ideas, this could be used either as a scalpel or as a bludgeon, right? This is sometimes used to bludgeon people over the head because are if you disagree with something that a great scholar says, well, where's your faith in the sages, right? You're supposed to trust in them, and um, and of course, part of that comes, which sage do you trust in, right? Which one, right? There may be great sages who disagree with one another, and so which one do you trust? Which one do you believe in? And and also that sometimes, for example, in the Talmud, there are sages who may say something which seems to be factually wrong, right? Which may appear to be factually wrong, or you may disagree with in some way, right? Some like scientific things. One of my favorite ones is um, that lice are born from sweat. Okay, you can kill lice on Shabbat because lice are not really animals; they're born from sweat. Okay, well, we know that's not true, right? We know that lice are not born from sweat. So some people will insist, no, lice used to be born from sweat back in the day, right? And somehow or another, nature changed, and now they're not born from sweat because they can't be wrong. Others will say that actually they are born from sweat, but you just don't know it. You don't understand biology well enough, but they understood biology at a higher level to know that they're really born from sweat. And right, so I would suggest that emunat chachamim does not mean that you have to have this kind of unquestioning faith in every single thing that somebody who is a hacham says, but that you have to trust authority. You have to trust in authority to be able to tell you things that you need to know, but of course, you have to investigate the authority. You have to, right, you have to use your brain also. God put a big, wonderful, supercomputer in your head and did not ask you to turn it off. Okay, so having faith in them is is important because you have to be able to accept the influence from people who are wiser than you. Kabbalat HaYisurim, to to accept suffering, to accept suffering. How we deal with suffering is, in some ways, where the pedal hits the metal, as they say, on being a human being, right? There's no person in the world that does not suffer. Okay, nobody. Okay, nobody. Now, we don't always have poor Lainey had 9 out of 10. It's 9 out of 10 pain for 2 weeks. Thank God most of us are not going to experience that anytime soon. I hope, and Be'ezrat Hashem, Lainey's not going to experience it anymore either. But all of us experience suffering. It's part of life. And we have a choice. We can either push it away and we can say, no, this is, I don't want this. I don't, but it's going to come anyway, right? It's going to come anyway. It's 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 a given in life, and so we accept it. And I remember there's a marriage therapist, well-known marriage therapist named uh, Schleifer, Heidi Schleifer, and she she once said that when suffering comes her way, she says, "Hi." That's her response. Hi. Oh, you're here. Right? I mean, because it is part of life, just like everything else, right? Just like everything else. And and I think also what's implied here is also to be able possibly to find meaning in suffering. That is that if suffering leaves you exactly the same, right? Accepting suffering means I don't push it away from me. I don't push it away from me, but I do try to understand what it means to me, what it is that I'm trying to learn. Now, that doesn't mean that we court suffering. It says accept suffering. It doesn't mean seek suffering. Okay? So again, you don't have to be, right? There's no mitzvah to be a masochist, right? You shouldn't be going out there, looking for situations in which you're going to experience suffering. That's not smart, right? That's not a wise thing to do. But when suffering comes your way, which it will inevitably, sorry, I hope I'm not the first person telling you this, but if I am, I apologize, is to accept it as cheerfully as you can, right? And to try to understand what it means for you and try to get whatever lessons from it that you can, to learn from it as best as you can. Hamakir ad mikomo, knowing one's place, recognizing one's place. So this word makom can mean lots and lots of things. Makom basically means literally a place. But makom also means like a person's state. Okay, for my Muslim friends, if you're Sufi oriented, right? It's a makam, right? Makam, right? A person's spiritual state, right? You have to kind of you have you have temporary state, right? We all have temporary states, right? And then we have our our more permanent state, our makam. So you should know your place. You should know who you are, and you should know what your situation is, right? Know know where you stand in the world, right? Know where you stand in the world, and be careful be careful not to overstep, not to say, yeah, state like station, yeah, like a station. Know your station, right? Know your place. Know. know where you are so that you don't overstep your boundaries. Now that can be in all sorts of ways. Don't think you're smarter or wiser than you are, right? To the point where you can't learn. It can become, my old advisor used to call it an unteachable, right? Somebody who was so full of themselves that it was impossible to teach them because they felt like they knew everything already. So what's the point? Right? To understand your limitations, to understand what your limitations are, what your talents are, who you are, and to be able to and makir, to recognize, right? To recognize, who you are. And again, we'll be talking a lot about that in duties in Path of the Just, coming up soon. V'sameach bechelko, to be happy with your lot, to be happy with your lot. And elsewhere it says in Pirkei Avot, who is the person who is happy? The person who is happy with their lot, right? That's the person who's happy. Because, look, if if you're not happy with what you have, you're never going to be happy because you're always going to be thinking that somehow or another it should be better. I would have, could have, should have done this, and then I would have had this, and everything could be better. But if you're able to be happy with what you have, to say, okay, this is what is on my plate. Now, again, okay, there is no commandment to be a doormat. Okay, so if you wake up in the morning and there's a pile of feces on your front lawn, okay, you can remove it, right? You can remove it. You don't have to be happy with your lot and go, oh, how did I? No, right? There, you have to be smart, right? And if something is there that shouldn't be there, okay, then you have to deal with it. But if there's something which is a consistent part of your life, and that it's your chelek, it's it's in your bag, right? It's in your, as we say in Yiddish, your pekel, right? It's in your bag. It's in your pack. It's in your knapsack, and you have to carry it around. Okay, you at least should be happy with, yeah, you at least should be happy with that, and to be able to say, okay. And this is where erech apayim. These are all related to each other. Patience, right? Patience, being able to accept suffering. All these things are interrelated and intertwined with one another. Okay, so to be able to be happy with what you have. So if you have a lot, okay, and if you don't have a lot, that can be okay too. Ha'oseh siag l'dvarav, a person who makes offense to his words, makes a fence to his words. So being careful what you say and how you say it. Okay, there's nothing more beautiful than a person who thinks before they speak. One day I hope to be one of those people. Okay? I've certainly met them, I've certainly seen them, and they're amazing. One day maybe I will be one. But to be able to make, and this asesyag, this word is used several times in Pirkei Avot. One of them is that we make a fence for the Torah, a way to kind of protect the Torah by creating a fence. Elsewhere, um, uh, it says siag lechachma shtika. Silence is a fence to wisdom. Silence is a fence to wisdom. So silence. So in order not to lose your wisdom, right? Sometimes you have to keep your silence. So to be careful with your words, careful how you use words, careful with the things that you say to people, and careful also not to overtalk things, right? To overtalk things. Sometimes even when um, yeah, Larry, but it's better to remain silent, be thought a fool, than to open your mouth and remove all doubt. True. Um, it's there's a lot of times when it would be best for us to be quiet. Um, Sometimes people just talk too much. Um, I find that one of my complaints sometimes about religion is we spend way too much time moving our mouths and too little time being silent and listening. Um, and so with that, I'm running over time. It's taking me like 3 times to get through one Mishnah, but that's okay. It's a long Mishnah. And so I will stop talking. I will make a siag. I will make a fence to my words. So, but you don't have to. Thoughts, ideas?
Control of words is a major area of personal struggle to me because I love words so much. And if I come up with a clever phrasing of something, it takes a major effort to stop and think about what is the impact of these words rather than saying, oh, isn't this clever? Let me say it. And oh, I just crushed that person's ego. Well, hopefully they'll get over it. But the words were so beautiful. That's
Yes,
a very bad thing, and I have to fight again. It is an ongoing struggle. I'm at least aware that I have the problem.
yes. Yeah, no, it's not easy. It's not easy. Um, a good zinger is so satisfying, but but probably best left unsaid. Um, that's a very good question. Um, Rose asked, what does Judy make of someone who can handle another's silence, for example, between partners? So the problem is between partners, silence is often stonewalling, right? It's a way of kind of locking the other person out. Um, I think there's a way of doing receptive silence, right? You can tell when a person is being silent and when a person is just being quiet, right? When a person is locking you out. And so maybe the best way to handle something like that is to be able to say to the person, hey, I'm not locking you out. Okay. I'm just kind of being in myself. Um, we actually, my wife and I go through that sometimes because we both like like to ignore each other a lot. We both like quiet a lot. And we check in with each other sometimes to make sure, okay, oh, this is our normal quiet. This is not some sort of weird quiet. Yeah, it's a normal quiet. So, but it's hard. We do spend yes, a lot of time talking, not enough listening, way too little taking action, right? How much? And that's something to talk about too. But that's also tomorrow. Everything is going to be in that path to the just, and we're just going to fold all these things up into that book. So, okay, guys, have a beautiful day. Thank you so much for coming. I appreciate it so much. And Bezrat Hashem, I'll be back tomorrow. I hope you are too. Bring your friends, bring your neighbors, bring your enemies, bring the enemies of your friends, friends of your enemies, and strangers off the street. Anybody. Bye.
All right, but
Yeah.
Bye.
thank you, but.
Welcome.